And as you can imagine, one of the biggest questions is Gene Haas and Haas Formula going to employ an American driver?
Well, the ideal candidate would be an American driver, absolutely. Ultimately, if we can bring along an American driver, I think that would just be the perfect scenario.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Schneider. And it's a pretty incredible time to be a Formula One fan in the United States right now. The Netflix series Drive to Survive has introduced the sport to a brand new audience, and there's positive momentum and energy everywhere you look. Around 400,000 people attended the United States Grand Prix over the 3-day race weekend, and the television ratings are also higher than ever. Now, it goes without saying that the combination of all these things is a recipe for massive growth in this country. But when it comes to the United States, one pretty big thing is still missing from Formula One, and that's an American driver. For a country with so many talented drivers, where motor racing has a pretty sizable audience, it's borderline unfathomable that since Michael Andretti in 1993, there have only been 2 Americans to start a Formula One Grand Prix. And to find the last American F1 winner, you have to go all the way back to Michael's father Mario, who won the 1978 Dutch Grand Prix en route to that year's championship. So this begs the question, why has it been so long? Well, there's a variety of factors to consider here. Most Formula One drivers make their connections through the European racing ladder, and for many, that starts at a very young age. And most families are probably going to be more inclined to start their child in karting somewhere here in the States instead. Guys like Alexander Rossi and Conor Daly tried the European route, and while Rossi did end up making 5 starts with Manor in 2015, both have since returned to the US and embraced the IndyCar Series as their home. Now, IndyCar is the top level of single-seater open-wheel racing here in America, and theoretically, it could be used as the final step on a path to Formula One. After doing a season of GP3 with Carlin, Joseph Newgarden returned to America in 2011 to win the Indy Lights Championship, and now he's a 2-time IndyCar champion. But despite that, he's never really even been considered for an F1 drive. There were briefly some rumors about him meeting with Gene Haas, but he was never really a serious contender for the seat. But ultimately, the biggest hurdle is the same hurdle almost every aspiring racing driver faces at some point in their career, and that's sponsorship. Funding is crucial, and that's especially true at the F1 level. While American Logan Sargent was just named to Williams Driver Academy, his lack of funding has kept him from making the jump to Formula 2, let alone going a step further into F1. And the American team, Haas F1, have run into this problem as well. Gene Haas is on record saying that in a perfect world, he'd love to have an American driver.
The ideal candidate would be an American driver, absolutely. But I think initially what we're looking for is we've got to have at least one Formula One experienced driver. Actually, it needs to be experienced in the 2014 package because it's totally different than 2013. And then ultimately, if we can bring along an American driver, I think that would just be the perfect scenario.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to funding, especially for a team like Haas. It's the main reason Nikita Mazepin still has his seat with the team. So with all things considered here, before even taking into account all the prestigious opportunities for drivers in the US, is it really worth going through all the politics, logistics, and hurdles necessary to make it to F1? A lot of you would probably say no, and hey, that's understandable. But, as if it weren't obvious enough from the title of this video, let me just play devil's advocate for a second here. Consider Colton Herta. He's one of the brightest young Americans in IndyCar, currently driving for Andretti Autosport. And yes, I know the Andretti Sauber talks have cooled off at this point, but I still think the idea is worth considering. Should Colton Herta take an F1 opportunity should one come his way? And in my opinion, without hesitation, the answer to that question is yes. Now you're probably thinking, but Ben, Herta's got so many years ahead of him in IndyCar. Why on earth would he give up a chance at Indy 500 wins and series championships with a top team to go fight for 13th in an F1 car? And to that, I'd say 2 things. The first is that it's incredibly rare for a driver to jump straight into a top F1 seat. Lewis Hamilton nearly winning the championship as a rookie at McLaren is the exception here, not the rule. Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, and Daniel Ricciardo all had to spend a year or 2 at Toro Rosso before getting a chance at Red Bull. Charles Leclerc spent a year at Sauber before moving up to Ferrari. Valtteri Bottas and George Russell had to spend a few years at Williams before getting their chances at Mercedes. And this is hardly a new thing. Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber started at Minardi. Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa started at Sauber. And even Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher made their debuts with Tolman and Jordan respectively. You can argue it's only worth it with a top team all you want, but the reality is that it's an unrealistic expectation for almost any driver entering F1. And secondly, Colton Herta is only 21 years old. A move to F1 would be extremely low risk for him. Elio Castroneves just won the Indy 500 at 46. That means that Herta could theoretically spend the next 5 years trying to break into F1, even if it's with a midfield or backmarker team. And in the worst case scenario, he could come back to the IndyCar Series and continue to compete for at least another 2 decades if it doesn't work out. It's low risk and high reward, because the best case scenario is that he puts together some impressive drives, finds some backing, and gets that chance with the top team. And from there, the sky's the limit. But the main reason I bring this up is because of what we just saw last weekend in Austin, and what we've been seeing in America the last couple of years. As a retail employee, I've honestly seen more customers come into our store in McLaren hats and Ferrari shirts than NASCAR gear since I started working there. And I can't even count on one single set of fingers how many college friends I know who didn't even know what F1 was before Drive to Survive, but are now hooked on the whole sport. American interest in F1 is arguably at an all-time high, with no signs of slowing down. And let me let you in on a little personal secret here. One of my biggest regrets in my time as a race fan is not getting into F1 sooner than I did. But you know what really got me into it?
Alexander Rossi, what a race. And it was so close to points as well. Does that matter, or is the joy of doing an American Grand Prix, completing it, seeing the checkered flag, just a sort of reward enough right now?
Nah, it matters for sure.
This right here is what got me hooked. As a young American, seeing Alexander Rossi on the F1 grid made me feel like I had a dog in the fight. Even if it was with the slowest team and the slowest car, it still got me excited. Now Rossi just turned 30, and I'd say things have turned out alright for him since he returned to America. So unless Toto Wolff gives him a call, his book on F1 is probably closed at this point. But Rossi is hardly America's last hope here. You've got Newgarden, you've got Herta, you've got Sargent, and you've got 16-year-old Jack Crawford, a Red Bull Junior team member who just finished his first Formula 3 season. Having any one of them on the F1 grid is only going to assist in growing F1's US presence even further. This is a country that not only loves sports, but also loves our US athletes. We see it right here at home. We see it internationally at the Olympics. And I guarantee you, we'd see it in Formula 1. This is a golden opportunity. The energy at COTA was simply incredible. Just imagine if there had actually been an American driver in the race. Heck, you can go back to Indianapolis in 2007 with Scott Speed, or to when Rossi raced at COTA 6 years ago to see what I mean. The buzz surrounding the race weekend would only continue to increase from there. It's been a long time since an American got a proper shot at Formula 1, and a lot would have to go right for it to happen. But if this year and this past weekend have been any indication, now's as good a time as ever to try. Thanks for watching.